Hi friends, my name is Megan and welcome to a special, hopefully very short episode of a Naughty Miss Knitting podcast. I really want to talk about test knitting. What is test knitting? What do you get from test knitting? Why would you test knit? And a little bit of designer feedback also from my good friend Claire Jackson at Perfectly Knotted. I did a couple of questions with her just from the designer perspective. I've got a lot of information from the test knitter perspective, from how to get chosen to some best practices. I'm not going to make this very long. If you have questions, please let me know. We can totally have a 2.0 if you want. I am going to include a very short section on my pet peeves as a tester too. Just things for you to look out for, especially if you have not test knit before. This is not a video just for people who are brand new to test knitting. It's also just like if you want more information about other types of tests, and for designers, if you want to hear a test knitter's perspective, I've completed over 60 test knits for all things from small accessories to full-size fingering weight sweaters, right? So I've kind of run the gamut here and I have a lot of opinions. So I'm going to share them with you today. But mostly first, let's just start with what is a test knit? I'm really doing this video because there's not a lot of information. Like you can go to designer profiles and they maybe put like a very short thing about what their test knits are and the rules that they might have. But I'm going to go over very generally, what is a test knit? So a test knit is the way that a designer sort of tests out a pattern's ease of reading it, ease of making it, and does it make the right garment for all sizes. Ideally, this is done for every size that's in the garment that it's graded for, so that you can tell, is like armhole depth, neck circumference, the gauge and weight of the pattern consistent and clear for all people knitting it. So that when a designer releases a pattern, they know that it's been, 30 people or however many have made it before. And hopefully all of the questions are, have been addressed and it is as clear as possible. It really protects designers from getting a lot of backlash if things are not right, numbers are missing, math is wrong. And also hopefully we've made the pattern better so that it's very clear and they don't get a ton of, questions. Being a designer does not mean someone purchases your pattern and then never asks you questions. They usually have their email there and maybe they get a lot of questions and maybe this is the way to keep them from getting so many questions. Okay, so that's really all it is. It's a pool of people that have volunteered their time, their effort, and their yarn to make this in exchange, typically for that pattern, the final iteration of that pattern that they have contributed to make better, and sometimes something else. I will say it's pretty rare that you're going to get something really good. You're usually going to get another pattern. I have seen a couple of designers who don't even give you another pattern. And to me, I think that's kind of spitting in your test knitter's face. That's a pet peeve of mine. So in case you're wondering, I know I haven't have it on the list below, but the least you can do is give us another pattern, because it's a lot of effort. If you're really going to talk about what people charge for sweaters, etc., especially if we're talking about garments, $600. So one other pattern would be a nice to have, or what I think is a requirement. So, what is the anatomy of a test knit? Let's just talk about overall the features, sort of what happens. So, you will find a test knit. I'm going to talk about a couple of ways you can find test knits in a minute, but you find a test knit, you apply in whatever manner you're required to. They look at the pool, and depending on how many people per size, they'll pick out who they want to have that. We're going to talk about how to be picked in a second too. And then you likely get the pattern emailed to you, sent to you in a group messaging thing, however that works. We'll talk about that also. And you usually get added to some sort of group chat on some sort of platform. I have a preference here, which is in my pet peeves section, but you get the pattern with with all of the information you need theoretically right at the start. In the application, this is something I think is really important for designers. Please make your applications very clear, not only with the deadline, but what is the yarn that you used? What is the gauge? And can people substitute? I think for most patterns that you see out there, there may be designers and indie dyers sometimes work in conjunction. So you might get 25% off of a yarn if you use that indie dyer, etc. But you usually can use whatever yarn you want, which is perfect for someone like me who has a nice stash that I can go to and I can shop for it. You can also shop for yarn and then get it as long as you get it in a timely manner, because obviously you have a deadline. You knit the pattern during the test window. There are usually expectations of some sort of final feedback form or some sort of information that you have to get to the designer for them to review any changes, and then it's released. There are sometimes photo requirements, not all the time. Those should also be spelled out in the application because some people don't feel comfortable putting their face out there, or maybe even their body. Test knitting has really helped me to embrace the Instagram photo. Honestly, that's the reason why my grid started being more pictures of myself, and how I got better at taking pictures of myself, because I had to put, not only just had to, some designers don't require it, but I really think it's important to see knits on other bodies than just the one single sample. So there's another thing that I think is great. Okay, so that's all that a test knit is. It is you doing a pattern, creating a knit from a pattern that has hopefully already been tech edited, which I think designers, that's another thing. Patterns should always be tech edited before. If you're finding really big problems in math and other things, and you have suspicions that pattern has not been tech edited, you should reach out to the designer. This should be an open line of communication. It's a great way to meet new people in the community, all of that stuff, and to meet these designers. They're real people. They often have jobs. They often have other things. Treat them like people. Treat them with respect. But that's when you can get that real feedback and let them know. So, okay, that's the anatomy of a test knit. So what else do we need to know about that? What are special test knits? I'm just going to go over this very briefly. There are some test knits, like I mentioned, that are in collaboration with yarn dyers, where you might get 25% off of a dyer you really love. That's one great way to have something extra, right? I just was able to talk about this week or last week is I also got asked to test knit something that's a very small test knit because the yarn is gifted, because the pattern is released by the yarn company, by a designer that I follow and have made other patterns from. So that is one thing. I mean, I got free yarn for that. That's super cool, but I, have deadlines. I have to, post on Instagram myself, etc. Sometimes you'll get more than one free pattern. Really, that's kind of the only things that might happen outside of that. And that's not sample making, getting the free yarn. That is mine to keep, both the yarn and the pattern. Okay. Let's talk about, where do you find test knits? So many places. So the answer is going to be kind of brief here. Instagram. Follow designers you like. Oftentimes they're going to put stories out, maybe even grid posts or other things asking for test knitters. Those usually have application processes. And again, your application, more people than not use Google Forms. So that's one thing you'll see. Sometimes it's just directly on their website in whatever form they have there. You can sign up for testing newsletters specific to testers with certain designers. I think Jessie May has this. Andrea Gowan, you have to get accepted into her testing program, so you can apply. She decides if she needs more people in a certain size or whatever. She'll look at your Instagram, etc., which we'll talk about getting chosen in a minute. But that's one way you can get in sort of special tester newsletters, and then you'll get emails to apply. And then the other way is, there's Ravelry groups. I've not dabbled into that a lot. I think Andrea Mowry does all her tests through Ravelry, which I've never tested for her. Caitlin Hunter does too. There might be a couple of others, which they have a lot of fans in that forum. So that's why they do that, right? They don't feel the need to bring it to Instagram because they have enough Ravelry group members, community members. The other way is Yarn Pond. If you haven't been on Yarn Pond before, it is literally a testing website. That's all that it is. You can go on, you can go through all open test knits. You can, I think you can filter and look by certain things. But anyway, I don't think it's used by a lot of designers, but there's definitely newer designers in there too that like they just maybe don't have a big enough Instagram following, whatever. What I like about Yarn Pond is they require certain information to be able to fill out the form, like on the designer side. So you get a lot of information up front, what you're going to get from the pattern, what the deadlines are, what kind of yarn you can use, gauge, sizing, all that kind of stuff is listed. And usually pictures too. I think always pictures. I have done a couple of tests through Yarn Pond. It's not my favorite for interactions, but it's fine for finding test knits. That's a great way to do your first test knits. So let's talk about how to break into test knitting. And I talked about this with Sylvan. The best way to break into test knitting is to knit for small designers. That's good. That's your answer. It's not any fancier than that. If you really want to just knit for big designers you really love to try to test knit for them, then you have to work on your Instagram photos. That's really the answer. I mean, you don't have to have a ton of followers. You don't have to be super active. What designers are looking for are good finished photos because yes, you are giving them critical and great information and feedback during the testing process and helping to improve the pattern. That's awesome. They want to show that people made this and it fit them well in the size range that they've picked testers from, so that people in all of those sizes will be more likely to buy the pattern because they're not going to make samples in all the sizes and find friends that it looks great to take photo shoots in all the sizes. So for example, some of Rebecca Clow, the Crayobea's testers are pretty much always from her little yarn group in Edinburgh. So when they take pictures, they have different people in different sizes wearing the knit, and those are all professional photos and they look great. And that totally, I think, helps her. Like, that's a very smart move on her sales campaign side, right? A lot of designers don't have that, right? So maybe they don't have a yarn group or they're not near other people or whatever. So they're relying on you as the tester to take good photos to get those out there for your Ravelry page and for Instagram. And no, not because you have a huge Instagram following, but so they can put you on their Instagram. That's what it's for, right? That's the biggest piece here. You are helping them advertise. I mean, you gotta be okay with that. So that's my opinion on breaking into test knitting. Knit for some small designers. That also helps with your application because you can say, yes, I've completed a couple of, test knits for other designers. And a lot of times that's the question, have you test knit before? Most designers are willing to risk it if you have proof on your Instagram that you have completed projects. They don't have to be 100 sweaters. They could even be other types of knits. As long as your pictures are in good natural light, they're clear, you don't have crazy looking backgrounds. Your face does not need to be in any of these pictures. If you're not comfortable with that, if you want your friends to model, that's okay. It doesn't even have to be the same person. It's really just that there is a clear, nice looking picture of the knit, either a garment or a hat or a whatever, that you can show that, hey, you can actually knit. And that there's you can take some photos that they're going to trust that they're going to have a good output at the end of this. That's the real mystery here. It's not, there's not tons of other things I think that are that are really different. So let me just read you a little bit about what I asked Claire. So I asked her a couple of questions. One is, if you're a first-time test knitter, what can you do to stand out to be picked? So this is what she has to say. Having a public profile. Again, followers don't matter. Good, quality, well-lit photos. There we go. Showcase a variety of projects. I think part of this is maybe if you're only knitting from the same designer, that's not variety, right? Or if you've only show super bulky hats, but you want to knit a sweater, they may not feel confident that you can knit a sweater. A lot of test or designers will also take a risk on beginning garment knitters. So again, maybe just showing that you've got a little bit of range in your knitting, so it's not only the same thing. but you don't have to have a sweater if you've never knit one before. And so she said, basically, we want to be able to see a selection of work to determine if they'd be a good fit for the test. And a lot of this is, again, you can complete a picture, you can complete a knit, and you can take a picture. So there we go. Tips for being a good tester. So this is from Claire, and then I'll talk about my pet peeves after this. But her tips for being a good tester is communication. She wrote it on all caps. It is important. It definitely is. As I said, you're providing feedback. Hopefully you're not just providing feedback at the end and your feedback is, I don't like the fit of this, right? But you're asking questions during the test knit. Is it supposed to, not just like clarity questions, but like, hey, I'm worried that the armhole's a little bit narrow in this. Let them relook at the math. Like, yeah, it sucks to have to re-knit something or part of something, but they want happy testers at the end who like the pattern. So this is part of the agreement of working with them, is good communication. Be active in the chats if you're in them. I am not a really great group chatter. I don't like to do it very much. It's just not in my wheelhouse. But what I will do is every week or so, I'll drop a picture in. Everybody loves to just see other people's progress, but also it's like, I don't have to write a big diatribe. I don't just have to give an update, like I'll just be like, hey, I made it to the whatever point and throw a picture in. That just is so that the designer knows you're actually knitting the thing in the timeline, right? You don't want to ghost them and you don't want to go totally dark and just have the end product, because again, they want to know, if you have questions or if you have feedback during the process. Following stated requirements. So for Claire, she has a Excel tracker that she also expects you to put either done or the date. I'm not exactly clear on that, but like you check in at certain parts of the pattern. So again, she knows that you are going to be able to make it on time, that you're not waiting for the last week to try to knit an entire garment. And then knowing what is expected from the designer. When you get your pattern, designers should be giving you all of this information. If you don't have this, this is a great time to reach back out to them. What is the tester deadline? What is the feedback that will be required? Not just will there be a feedback form, but like what are the pieces they required? Claire does a really amazing job of this up front. So she tells you what measurements you're going to need to take, the yarn, that you need to know yarn yardage, type, et cetera, so that from the get-go what you're going to have to record for her. That that you may or may not be required to put pictures. Sometimes people don't have the public profile piece for Instagram. Sometimes you don't need a Ravelry page, those kinds of things. The Ravelry tester code, if there is one, that should be included at the beginning, or that they acknowledge they'll get that to you at the beginning. And then any other special, information you need to know. Claire says the biggest thing for her is communication. She said, I want to be able to see that you're making progress and know about any issues in a timely manner. I asked testers to update the tracker. We talked about this. And I think part of this is, again, if they need to be making changes, it's so much better if you put your feedback in early or your questions in early, because they can make adjustments and then everybody can get a new release pattern. And hopefully people who are a little bit further behind than you will benefit from those questions, notes, whatever answered, and be able to say to the designer, like, hey, yeah, this is now no questions here, all clear. The worst thing that could happen is nobody gives any feedback. Everybody wants to make changes at the end. The designer has to rewrite the pattern. They should really retest it then. That's not, that new pattern hasn't been tested. And so you don't want them to have to start all over, right? You're in agreement to work with them for this piece. Okay. And then she said, advice for beginner testers is just start early. Again, you may have more questions. If you are an excellent garment maker, but just have never test knit, then maybe this doesn't apply to you, but like get at it early and ask questions, because if it's something's not clear to you, that's not a dumb question. It could just be that you're new, but it could also be that like, that's not right, or it was written silly. So yeah, this is my feedback on that piece. Okay, I want to talk about a couple of my tester pet peeves. So designers, this one's for you guys, but also for everybody else here to just know about, right? One of my tester pet peeves is not having a group chat of some sort. I do test knit for Tori Yu, and she does not do any kind of tester group chats. That's okay. Like, I know that from her, and that's, I'm aware of that. She also has she works in fashion, right? She has very clear patterns all the time. This is a Tori unit. But I generally really like if there is some sort of group chat that it is on Slack or Discord. I really hate Instagram for chats. I just think that information gets lost. One exception that I've recently come across is Florence Miller, who I'm doing a test knit for now, did 2 chats, one that's just information and one that is, and like really just from her, and then one that is the chat. That's also okay. Though Instagram still is like, it's just not easy to search. So if somebody wrote something that you want to look up later, you can't find it. Designers not being communicative. Again, you know, Claire's pet peeve is testers not being communicative. Mine is when designers aren't. I haven't done a lot of tests, and I won't test for somebody again if I don't feel like they're listening to the feedback. This goes for listening to feedback, providing timely updates to a pattern, and giving clarifiers when there are any, or when there are any questions. I have very rarely done a test knit where I thought the designer just like really failed at this. But I have friends who have definitely had this happen to them. And those testers are on my like no apply list. It matters, you know, you have to be, I mean, obviously designers are aware this is a ton of work. You're giving 20 to 40 hours for a garment of your time. Yeah, you get a free pattern, but again, $8 to $10 is not the equivalent of 20 to 40 hours and yarn. So please be respectful of your testers and get those updates, or at least just let them know when to expect an update. At the very least, answer the question of, is this right or wrong? Because people will just pause, and there's nothing more discouraging than either forging ahead and being wrong, or waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and just like losing steam on a project because you didn't hear back from the designer. I also, to go with this, is when feedback's not listened to, like if it's just aesthetic feedback, or, you know, like okay, this goes hand in hand with, I also don't like to test knit when you can't modify. I do understand that people are putting out patterns because they've written the pattern and they don't want certain things modified because that would change the pattern. Okay, I get that. But I think there are certain things like length preferences. We don't all feel the same kind of confidence in every kind of knitwear or every kind of top or whatever, that I think if you don't allow people to change length on certain things, then that's sort of like unrealistic. I also think like if you change length, as long as you require a Ravelry page with notes, that's fine. I think you should let people do that. That being said, you should never test something and change a bunch of stuff without asking the designer. I think that feels like it goes without saying, but that doesn't all the time. But also when there is like feedback form is due and the patterns are released one day later and it was a shorter testing window, it's likely a lot of people didn't give great feedback beforehand. And I think you need to take all that into consideration. It feels like you're not going to read our feedback and just release the pattern if that's the timeline for it. So for me, I think at least give a few days so you can make tweaks as needed. That's a personal preference, okay? I get that. And also my other pet peeve, or my last pet peeve, I guess, and the most important really, is timing. All test knits that are garments with sleeves should be 8 weeks. That's just, it feels arbitrary. I get that. But like, I do think you need to give people the grace of getting yarn, swatching, swatching twice, blocking that swatch, whatever things you have as requirements just to get started, and then knit something. Most of us who test have jobs or families, or jobs and families. And we have not infinite knitting time, right? And a lot of people have other projects. So just, 8 weeks is a great amount of time. If it's sleeveless, I think maybe 6 weeks you could get away with, depending on the weight of yarn. And if it's a long sleeve sweater and we're in like the busy time, especially if there's holidays involved, like give us 12 weeks. I know that's hard for designers. They want it, they get excited, they want to put something out, but like this is kind of that forethought and planning. Like that's just it's part of the business. If you're going to test it well. Don't just test it to check a box. Do it because you care about the fit and your test knitters. I also have a pet peeve of, I said that was my last one, but this is just like a very minor thing. Like give your testers props on Instagram. If they have tests for you and given all that time and you want them to share and they have public profiles, do a post that's everybody and tag them in it. Or at the very least, do stories, and not just the stories they do, but go to their picture and write a comment about the thing. Like, I know sometimes the tester pool is really big, but like it feels thankless when you don't do that. And we've done all this work to do, to make the pattern better and really to knit the garment and take pictures, which feels like a big task sometimes. So that is my request from everyone. A lot of designers do a great job. I'm not saying that this is like a thing that everyone fails at. It's just like, that's a pet peeve when I test something and I don't feel like I get enough of a shout out, because quite frankly, I didn't just do this for me. Yeah, I got a cool sweater out of it, but like, in the time crunch, etc. And then really quick, let's go over why I test knit. I test knit because I really love the community. I like to be part of the design process for sure, but it's like a constant cal, right? I like to see what colors people pick. I like to talk through pattern things. I think Claire does a really great job of this, again, because she like fosters this online Discord community, and a lot of people post yarn opinions, yarn ideas. They're posting, just like life updates for things like as they're going through the test knit, and I really love that. That's not the case for every test knit, and that's okay. I still really love just the momentum. I do like to give the feedback. I like to, test, make sure numbers make sense. When I get a pattern, I go through it right at the beginning and I try to read through the logistics of the whole thing. I highlight all my numbers. I just like make sure I understand what's going on. Just so off the bat, I'm not like, hey, the sleeve is missing, or like a lot of language is missing here, something like that, just so no one gets too deep. But I think if you've never test knit before and you're interested in doing it, make sure you have done and successfully completed a cal first. That is usually something that has a timeline. You have to go pick out your yarn. Yes, a lot of times that does require you to buy a pattern, but like find one that you really love. Maybe find one that has free pattern options, but certainly you should not do a test knit if you don't know if you like deadline projects. It's really disappointing to designers when they have people ghost on them. Life happens, don't get me wrong. There are totally valid reasons why you might have to drop out of a test knit. Claire has a really great link. I'm just talking about her a lot, but we talked about this. Has a really great link in her applications, maybe even, but it might be somewhere on her Instagram profile, of just keeping good relationships with designers, even if you have to bow out of a test knit. The real advice of this boils down to communication. Let them know what's going on. You don't have to give them all the gory details if it's something, but like deaths and family happen, big moves, unexpected life events just occur. And you should not let this, it's just a test knit, right? Like don't let it overcome your life or add a lot of stress to you. But make sure you tell them very early, as soon as you know whether or not you can complete it, so that you keep a good relationship. A lot of designers will put people on a never test again list if you ghost them. That's not awesome for you, especially if you really love the experience and something just occurred. Think of it like a responsibility, which I think it is, and then you should be, treated accordingly. I love test knitting. This is not like a don't test knit thing, but I do think that there's a lot of logistics and things that go into it, and you should make sure that's a good choice for you. Knitting should be fun. If it's not something that brings you joy, the test knitting process, then don't do it. It's okay. I get that there's kind of a lot of pressure and you want to be in the cool crowd or something like that, but like, we're just people that get to make it a little bit early. A lot of great designers do fun knit-alongs after or other things. Join those if you're not sure that you like the pressure, because there's no harm, no foul. If you don't finish it, you don't finish it. But designers are asking you for trust that you are going to complete the pattern, not just get a free pattern for them and then ghost, right? It's not a cool way for us to foster community here. Those are my notes. That's what I have to say about test knitting. I hope this was helpful, educational, that you liked it. If you have other testing opinions, pet peeves, questions, things I didn't cover, let me know. Let's keep the conversation going. I can also address something in a regular podcast episode. And that's all for me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.